Hi and welcome back. We're now looking at part 2 of schizophrenia disorders and schizophrenia spectrum and psychotic disorders. So we're going to start with the theoretical perspectives. The psychodynamic perspective, in the more traditional psychodynamic model, schizophrenia represents a regression into our psychological state corresponding with early infancy, in which the prodding, that id poking at it, producing bizarre, socially deviant behavior, and gives rise to hallucinations and delusions. Harry Stack Sullivan placed more emphasis on this mother-child relationship, an anxious, hostile interactions between mother and child. The psychodynamic perspective have not really been able to empirically demonstrate this early childhood experience, or more importantly, this mother-child relationship to be the source cause of schizophrenia in adults. It was for many years, for a lot of disabilities, the explanation was parenting, that somehow parents had misparented or mothers had mismothered, and that was the cause. But that's been quite clearly rooted out. There are examples where that might be for some experiences, but not as a root cause for all disabilities. Now let's look at learning perspective. Learning theorists propose that some form of schizophrenic behavior may be a result of a lack of social reinforcement, which leads to gradual detachment from the social environment and increased attention to the inner world of fantasy. Now, modeling and selective reinforcement is of bizarre behavior may explain some schizophrenic behaviors in a hospital setting, because you could be learning things from other people. As one witnesses bizarre behavior, they act as a model source or a meaning of gaining some part of a positive reinforcement from their behavior. So it doesn't explain, learning doesn't explain all elements about how that's going to occur. So that's where it's a partial explanation here. Now, biological perspective is certainly going to be a part of this. Research has determined strong linkages between biological factors and schizophrenia. Evidence for genetic factors comes from studies of family patterns of schizophrenia, twin studies, and adoption studies. The mode of genetic transmission remains unknown. Most researchers do believe that the neurotransmitter dopamine plays a role in schizophrenia, especially the more flagrant features of the disorder. The overactivity of dopamine centers, the sites where dopamine molecules can attach and lock. People with schizophrenia tend to have more dopamine receptors and more sensitive to dopamine neuroleptic drugs. These drugs block dopamine receptors, thus reducing the effect of dopamine and the impulses giving rise to schizophrenic behavior. So it's a really helpful strategy. Now, the viral factors may also be involved in defining proof of viral involvement is lacking. Some work is being done to look at not just viruses, but also other attacks on the immune system. Evidence of the brain dysfunctions and structural damages in schizophrenia is accumulating. It is because of this use of their new technology, some of it is newer than others, like the PET scans and EEGs and CTs and MRIs, have all helped identify abnormalities within the brain of people with schizophrenia. Most notably are the enlarged ventricles are one of the findings. This also suggests a loss of brain cells. Within our brain, the hippocampus and the amygdala. Now, these are two structures in our limbic system, the system that regulates emotions and higher functions. As is often the case with psychological disorders, there are a few clear answers or explanations for them, but researchers are really uncertain about the causal pathways. I have mentioned several times through this course, and it's one that's embraced by a lot of researchers. It's the Diathis stress model. The Diathis stress model posits that schizophrenia results from an interaction of a genetic predisposition. That's the Diathis. And the environmental stressors that we all might experience, family conflict, child abuse, emotional deprivation, loss of supportive figures, and early brain trauma can all play a role in activating that predisposition. It has been mentioned, and it's worth addressing, its family theories. Family factors such as communicating deviance and expressed emotion, they may act as sources of stress that increase the risks of development or the reoccurrence of schizophrenia among people with a genetic predisposition. In the 1950s, a double-blind communication theory, whatever a child does is wrong, that's the premise, where considering the disrupted communications within some families, in particular the studies looking at communication deviance and expressed emotions seemed to be, there was a bit of a link, if you will. Communication deviance, this involves the parents' vague, unclear, or disrupted or fragmented communication with their children, and where the parents don't really focus on what their children are saying. They may become a risk factor for schizophrenia in genetically vulnerable individuals because they haven't had this element of establishing trust and reliability with their children. They're not showing as much attention. That distancing might be part of the reason that schizophrenia may emerge. Expressed emotions is another measure for disturbed family communication. It's in this example where family is not supportive of the person with schizophrenia. Instead, they're hostile, critical, and unsupportive. The family condition is very difficult to improve, or if they have improved, it's difficult to maintain that improvement. There appears to be some cultural variables that are expressed emotions that can be affected. Now, it's really difficult when we talk about it in terms of family, is that it's certainly not all families are perfect, but not all families, regardless of how they parent, will produce a child with schizophrenia. So there is this genetic component, but family can play a role because it's the early involvement of maybe poor communicating families that can set the stage for the level of stress to crank up, where this might, in terms of the Diathis stress model, activate the schizophrenia process to begin to emerge. This is a tough topic, certainly, because it's one we often misunderstand, so I'm hopeful that this has brought a little more clarity for you. All right, so we have one more chapter to go, and then we're done for the semester. All right, everybody, we'll see you in the last video. Bye now.